Góðan daginn and welcome to the Project Pal. My name is Gunnhildur, I'm an Icelander, live in Iceland, and this is my podcast called the Project Pal because I have projects and they are on pals. I talk mainly about yarn, about knitting, crocheting, the weather, because I'm a stereotypical middle-aged Icelander, and yeah. Confession time, I have not really been knitting or crocheting for the... So yeah, I haven't really been doing a lot of crochet. I did not end up taking anything with me to Reykjavik, but I have started the third scheme on the blanket, so that's at least going a little bit. Did not start on the shawl, again because I didn't take any crafting items with me. The funny thing though is that I did bring books with me. That I would, because I thought, well, I'm gonna be spending some time at the hotel, which by the way, Grand Hotel Reykjavik, fantastic. I am, however, a horrible vlogger, so I never vlogged anything in Reykjavik, and except in my hotel room, which is disappointing. But I was kind of a little bit busy just experiencing. So, but yeah, I brought these two books with me. I still need to finish Piranesi, which I did read a little bit, and I'm like, oh, I want. This is one of those books that I don't want to finish because I'm having so much fun reading it. The other one that I still haven't started on is the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Again, still haven't started because on a whim, I looked at my book pile by my... Yeah, it's a pile. It's like my project pile, it's like my reading pile. And on a whim, I brought this book, The Air Affair. And I'm starting to realize that I am acquiring a taste for a certain literature genre. Anyway, type of books to read. This is a how do I explain this book? This book is wonderful and wonderfully confusing. The world building, it is complete, like, it's an alternative timeline where, for example, they don't have airplanes, they have airships. Which, by the way, I was reading that chapter when I was in the airplane. Like, this was my airplane buddy, and I hadn't quite finished it. But yeah, it's an alternative timeline where time travel is a thing for certain people, and basically history is being constantly altered without people quite realizing, because that's kind of what happens. Like, this book is very smart without rubbing it in. But the most fun part is, like, even the time travel isn't the biggest part. The biggest part is the fact that literature is basically religion. And like, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this book because I'm having a lot of fun reading it. It's about a detective who has to go into literal or fictional stories to save the characters. Like, that's the hook of the book. But there's so much that happens in this book. It's like, it's a little confusing, but I'm having so much fun reading it. And again, it's another book that I don't want to finish because I'm having way too much fun. I do believe it's a part of a series. It's, again... But yeah, I'm finding this trope of people having to deal with fictional stories that turn out to be not quite fictional. It's just... Also, I've kind of put myself in a book buying, not quite a ban, but a rest. And then I went to Reykjavik and bought 10 more books. So I brought 3 books with me to Reykjavik, and then I brought back home 13 books. So good job. But I didn't buy any yarn. I did go check out yarn, but I didn't buy yarn, mostly because most of the money, my money went to books. But I did see one store that had ice yarns, which I found very interesting, because I do work a lot with ice yarns, because heaven knows I bought a lot throughout the years and I need to use it up. And I did find it really interesting to see how they priced their yarn. So I tried not to look too much into it, because I realized as soon as I saw the price tags, I'm like, if I do this, I'm gonna start thinking about the actual worth of the yarn that I have, and that number is going to terrify me. So yeah, I mean, I was very interested to see, for example, in one lovely basket, very lovely yarn, that said Sail Winter. And I don't want to diss some people, so I'm not gonna talk any more about it, but I mean, at least they're buying yarn to sell it, so we'll leave it at that. And it was lovely yarn, so just don't need to buy any myself, because I have enough. But as for Reykjavik herself, 5 days is enough for me. I am an East Fjorder. I have a rather low tolerance for staying in our capital city, because I don't really deal well with a lot of people around me. I like being in small towns where there's fewer people and more nature. I do like Reykjavik, however. She's shaping up quite a bit. I mean, a few years ago she was... they didn't... You kind of got the feeling that they didn't quite love her as much as she deserves to be loved, so hopefully, fingers crossed, it's been changing a little bit, because where you live deserves to be loved by you. If you don't love where you live, that's really sad. Like, Lord knows I haven't always loved where I live, but it feels a lot better when you do. And I did get to see the libraries. I didn't go to any library, I saw a lot of museums. So I did start with the Thjóðminjasafnið, which I am so happy I went to. It was gorgeous. And then I dragged my cousin with me to the Phallological Museum, because I read a lot about it and it seemed really, really interesting, and I do have to recommend it. I am regretting not buying one of their mugs that had a male member. But I was put off by it, because my cousin, who is the same age as me, we are both 37, she was giggling like a little schoolgirl, and that's really off-putting when you want to buy something that's, would have made my mom laugh her ass off, but there you go. The museum itself, is so nice, it is so tidy, it is so well put together, and the specimens, it's really interesting when you have an interest in animals to see the same organ again, see what is the same thing and what is different. For example, with a lot of the rodents, they don't really have, I mean, I think there was, like, they are so itty bitty, like the smallest specimen, there was a magnifying glass so you could actually see it, but most of them have like little bones, and it's like, okay, interesting. It's also really interesting to see how the preservation throughout the years has gotten better, and how they do things differently. Like, they are taking more of the flesh and the tissue around, so you can actually see like it still has some fur on it. And I do realize that this is a rather spooky and creepy and cringy discussion point for some people, but yeah, sorry. Although I have to say, most of the visitors are women. Quite a few men are put off, like, I can understand. But there were a couple of men. I was really happy to see one of them, because he was as interested as I was in reading the information on the animals and actually looking at the structures and the differences. That was a lot of fun. There were so many people who were actually interested in what the museum is. And then we got to the whale part, and it was just hilarious. They have 2 specimens of, I can't even remember the species, but they are in like huge cylinders in the middle of the floor, and you can, like, there are a few people who were taking pictures of each other standing by them, because those things are about as tall as I am. I am 163 meters, or about 5'4". So you can imagine how big those things were, and they are not the biggest. But they're the biggest in the museum, and it's like, so that's definitely another museum that I need to recommend. I was really happy to manage to go to the Thjóðminjasafnið because, I mean, I was getting to see a lot of exhibits that I've only ever read about, like the first printed manuscript here in Iceland. That was Guðbrandsbiblía, or the Bible of Guðbrandur, who was a bishop here. I got to see Valþjóðsstaðahurðin, which is a carved door, and the details that people have been carving into wood. Just actually managed to see these things was so much fun, and it was so gorgeous. Seeing the they have a small I say, about the length of my room, a display table with all the like milk cartons and pudding cartons and all that development of food contain, things, food wrappers, things here in Iceland that have been in productions for years. And I finally managed to understand why my mother and brother have been talking about, like, when my brother was young, so that's about 50, 60 years ago, milk, and we now have them in like cartons, like with 4 sides and top and a bottom. That came out really smart. But decades ago, the milk came in these triangular little containers, paper containers, and I finally understood why those two kept talking about how much better it was, because I'm looking at it and it looks like it fits way better into your hand rather than the large boxes, basically. So I finally managed to understand what they meant with that. And just seeing all those things at the exhibition, it was just gorgeous. The skeleton, like, oh. So they have at one point a very gorgeous, tasteful display, I would say, of 3 skeletons. One is very fragmented, unfortunately. There's just a few bone fragments of a man who was buried, centuries ago with his horse. And you can see, I think it was the teeth bones that were in the display, and you can tell that a horse tooth is like meow. The other 2 skeletons were a very gorgeously preserved skeleton of a woman, with some of the things that she had been buried with. And the saddest was an infant, and I'm like, it's been about a millennia since the poor little thing passed away and was buried, but it still makes you so sad. Like, this is something that happens constantly. It's still happening, and it will continue to happen. We won't all live to a ripe old age, but every single time when you see the remains of a child, you just get sad, because that's unfair. It is really unfair when you see the remains of a child that never got to walk. But it's a really beautiful display. They put a lot of work into it, and a lot of other things, like the beads that my ancestors had, like the amount of, I was staring at some of the beads, and I'm pretty certain I've seen very similar things just in a craft store. It's like, it is mind-boggling the amount of things that people did. Another museum that another friend of mine took me to is called the Landnámssetrið, the settlement museum that is in Austurstræti, I believe, and that is gorgeous as well. So basically, a few years ago, they were doing renovations on a hotel, and in order to do the renovations, they had to lift the hotel. And when they they lift an entire building. Is like, how do you do that? They did that, and they found the remains of a house beneath the hotel. So they start excavation, because that's what you do when you find something like that. And instead of just covering it up and whatever, what they decided to do instead was build around it and make an exhibition of it, which is so fantastic, because you can actually see the things that people were actually making and how they made it. Like, the fact, just how people have been doing these things for millennia is unbelievable. Like, making a wall of stones double, so there's space between the rows of stone, and then you put soil, earth, in between the stones, so you have a wall, so that you have the warmth inside. It's just, and they didn't even have like proper tools to do those things. They made them out of wood. They were using wooden implements because that's the material that they had. And just, it is so cool to see all the things that people managed to do. It is so cool. So my friend had also taken me to two other museums, and that was the Rock Museum in Keflavik, or the Pop Museum. Do they call it Rock Museum? I think it's called the Rock Museum, and it is gorgeous. It is not like, it's not huge. Like, it was literally just me, my friend, and the counter lady. Lovely girl. But it was so much fun to see how they chose to display things, like how they connect rock with like the national anthem, with poetry, and connecting all these things, because nothing is born out of nothing. You don't get just fully formed pop music and ignore everything that came before. That just doesn't happen. Can't be done. Don't do it. That's disrespectful to history. It was so much fun just reading, because this is another one of these things that you know about this thing. You know, but you don't know, because giving yourself the actual time to just settle down and read the things, dates and descriptions, and what is happening in the music industry and culture in Iceland throughout the past 200 years or so. It is so gorgeous. Like, it was so much fun. There were also some of the clothing that our more famous musicians have been wearing, and their iconic costumes, and the instruments, the entire glass container full of guitars and ukulele. The ukulele they were so cute, and just so many things. It was so nice. Also, it was just me and my friends, so it was nice and calm and quiet. And then we went to the Viking Museum in Jægravik. That was cool as well, because I've been there before, and my friend was a little unsure if she should, but her son has autism, and he really loves the National Museum, the Thjóðminjasafnið, and she wanted to see if the Viking Museum would be something that he would be interested in, and I think he should be, because it has pretty much the same things. Like, there are the beads, the brooches, the ships. Like, there are actual ships in the museum, and they displays, like, it is a very nice looking museum. The biggest thing about that one, though, is that they have the replica Viking ship. I think it's a knurr rather than a long ship, called Vikingur. Vikingur was made, I do believe, around the year 2000. I can't remember. But basically they made it decades ago, and made a replica of a Viking ship to sail to North America. It was a lot of fun. I do recall some of the things that they were talking about in the news at the time. Definitely a documentary about it somewhere. So, but yeah, they have that ship in the museum, and it is the pride of the museum. And it's so much fun because you can go on board. That's the most fun part. And as soon as I went in and I got that smell, the ship has a very distinct smell. Not a bad smell. It's just very, very distinct. It's the smell of wood, of old wood, a little bit of tar, but not that overwhelming. It's just very, very distinct, and I love it. Yeah. So that was. Now, I had been to the Viking Museum and the Rock Museum before, but it was really nice to be able to go with a friend and just take the time to actually look at things. It was so giving, so giving. But yeah, so I'm filming this on Sunday, so hopefully I'll be able to get this out. I'm still in my pajamas because I managed to get a cold from yesterday. And I don't regret it, because yesterday, on Saturday, was the Skógadagurinn Mikli, the Great Forest Day. It's a yearly event held in Hallormsstaður, which is near Egilsstaðir, and it stands by the great river Lagarfljót, which is famous for a certain monstrous worm that's still chained up at the bottom. And Hallormsstaður, or rather Hallormsstaðarskógur, the forest itself, has been there since before settlement of Iceland, and I love it. Honestly, if something would ever happen to the forest, I would probably pass away from just sadness. Like, I'm not joking. And the main event of the Great Forest Day is that it's a celebration. It's a celebration of the forest. It's a there's a competition between tree fellers. So we did miss the first part this year, because we were a little bit late. But the first part, they are in a little different area than from where the main event is, and they what is that event again? They fell. There's a timed competition in felling a chosen tree, debranching it, and I think tidying up the branches. I think that's what the announcer said. And then the second part is later. I think it's around like 2 or 3-ish. Like, the event it's only 4 hours, so it doesn't drag on too long. It's from 12 to 16. I love it. It's just enough, which was really nice yesterday because it was cold. Hence the cold I have today. But the second part is so much fun. Like, I'm so glad I didn't miss it. That's when it's another time competition, and it's again in 3 parts. So there is there's a pole, a red pole that they have to chop with an axe. Chop it, in half. A part that they can also do is that they can chop it part way through and then break the rest, which they all did. And then they have to run with the axe to another part where there's an egg on a tree stump, and they get 1 shot. And they have to raise the axe above the head and bring it down in 1 clean cleave, and cleave the egg in half and break it. And then they have to go to another part where there's a big bough or tree, and they have to cut a 2-centimeter thick discs, 3 of them. Then they have to shut their they do that with a chainsaw. Then they have to shut the chainsaw off and run back to the starting position, and it's so much fun to watch them do it. I do believe that the reigning champion won, I mean, he's fast. And the thing about the egg, if they fail to break the egg, they get a 40-second penalty. It was great. So that is the main event of the Forest Day. There's just so much more, because it is also the local like cow farmers and sheep farmers. They cater the event, so you get like the oh, not cow farmers, beef farmers. They have a whole animal roasting on over a fire, like a whole animal, like not just bits, whole animal, and they are champions like that. Okay, so excuse me. They then, you know, just cut the meat up into little squares, and then people take it on wooden platters and go around offering people. And the meat was so good. Like that is the pretty much the only time I eat beef is there, because they know how to cook it. There's also the sheep farmers who also like grill really nice bits of lamb. Like we got the choice bits, and that's also like cut into little bits and pieces, and then people go around offering, and that was, it was so soft. It was just perfect. There were also hot dogs that are grilled. They also grill the bread, and that just makes the bread so much better. There was, and also the main event, like you go there for the competition and the kettle coffee, and that's always the biggest line, because they have these giant black kettles, ancient kettles, that they have on hooks. They put them on hooks over open fire. They only have the water over the fire. And the kettle master, the coffee master, it's always the same guy. He then takes the kettle off the fire, opens it, takes an entire bag of coffee, ground coffee, upends it into the kettle, and he stirs it with a sprig of wood, a little tree branch that he's taken from the embers, and he reheats the stick in the embers and uses that to stir the coffee. And I swear I am not a coffee person, but that is the one pure black coffee that I will drink that, because it's kettle coffee. It's just, it is on a completely different level. There's also on the same space lumuk, which, I mean, they are baked over, they are baked on big metal thingamajigs, seats over open fire, and lumuk, I guess you could put them in pretty much like the same way as American pancakes, but they are not American pancakes. They're just tasty, and they're good, and they're nice, and it's so nice to just get like lumuk and kettle coffee, and just, it's always the biggest line. The fun part is that it's always in the same spots also. Like the beef is always in the same place, the sheep is always in the same place, the kettle coffee is always in the same place. And the line to get there, you kind of go along an old path down a small slope, and it's fine because there are so many tree roots that they act as little steps, so there isn't that much of a risk of slipping unless it's raining. And it wasn't raining, it was cold, but it wasn't raining. And the path that the line goes through is always right next to the climbing tree. And the wonderful thing about the climbing tree is that like, okay, first off, just, I'm gonna start with saying that tree, that tree is in the rudest health that a tree can be in. That tree is so healthy, it's like, it is wonderful, and it's probably the most loved tree in the entire forest. And it's called the climbing tree because that's exactly what it is. It's of, I think it's some type of a fir tree, or yeah, and it's really brandy. It has a lot of branches, which is why years and years ago children started climbing it. And you know how you keep trying to tell kids not to do things, but it's just such a human thing. Like, even as an adult, you see a tree like that and you're like, oh, I want to climb. It's just this tree screams to be climbed. So instead of always telling the children not to climb the tree, what they've done is that they kept the like most sides of the tree is as is. One side, however, they have cleared completely of all and all the branches. They have cut them, they have polished them, and there's a lot of them, and they've cut the top off and made a little seat. So this tree that is in the rudest health, like it is so healthy, it is so sturdy, is just like the loveliest and most loaded tree in the entire forest. I couldn't take a picture of it because it was constantly being climbed by children. And not only is there, like, YouTube has a thing about not showing children in videos unless it's been stated, and I completely agree with that. I don't want to show children in my videos, mostly because I don't have any, but also they can't agree with it. But there's also like laws here in Iceland about personal protection, and I do not want to show children, expose them without their knowledge and without their consent to whoever. Like, no, children must be protected. That's just how it is, and that's how it's going to be. They must be protected. So the only drawback is I can't show you a picture of the tree because the children come first. But let me just reiterate, that tree, even when you're an adult, you kind of want to just go climb it. I would probably fall on my ass, but it's a climbing tree. Oh. But they also did a different thing this year, and I don't know if it's because of the pandemic. This is the first proper year that they managed to have it for, like, I think that, did they have the challenge last year? I can't remember. But they are starting with a new thing that is specifically for children. They started with challenges, and so that's a bit of a new area that they like set up, and I love it. So, because of course I had to go check it out, even though I'm not a child and I don't have any children, still wanted to check it out. And they signed up, like the children signed up on a piece of paper to participate in the challenges because they were competing to win. There were, I think, 3 or 4 children who won, and they won carved out knives, like butter knives, and I know that they are gorgeous. Like, they were something to work towards. But the thing is that in order to compete, they had to sign a slip of paper, and that slip of paper was underneath another fir tree, one that has these gorgeous sloping branches. So underneath it you get this just room that is shaded, it is nice. So the staff put up tables there with pens and papers for the children to sign up, and I'm like, that is magical. And then when you get to the test or the trials, it was so much fun. There was one area where they had like the wooden disc that they could paint with I think it was like waxy type of colors. There was small area that there were planks. You know the type. So there were like 2 or 3 planks, and one end pivots. So if you step on it, the other end goes up. So the challenge was you had to cross it with other people, but you have to like cooperate so that you don't step on the end and throw the other person off. It was gorgeous, it was so nice, but most of the kids were in the other areas. So there was another disc painting area that had paint, dripping paint. That area was constantly covered. There was a bonfire. You couldn't get to the bonfire because the kids, they got sticks, cleared branches, and then they put dough at the end, and then they baked their bread over the fire. But the most popular area, right after the bonfire, there were two young men sitting on tree stumps with another stump in front of them. And they had these fire logs that, are the last stages to be split. And then they had these little axes. And the challenge for the kids was that these young men, they would be sitting there with the firewood in front of them, and they would drive the axes into the firewood, and then it was the kids' job to take a wooden mallet and bang the head of the axe to split the wood. Like, I can tell you, those guys could not get any chance to stand up. Like, they were constantly surrounded by children. It was so much fun. It was so cool. Just putting that up for the children to do. It was so cool. So yeah, I think I've been rambling for about 40 minutes now. Do need to edit this down a little bit so I don't have the same problem as last time. So yeah, the reason last week's video didn't go up last Sunday is because my internet kept fluctuating, and the video just would not upload. Like, I think I tried it like about 5 times before I left on my trip. I could not get the dang thing to load up. And when I got back home, I think it took me like 3 tries. I actually had to go back into the video editor and re-export it, and which is weird actually, because I fiddled around with the minimal settings just the tiniest tad, and when I export, you can pick like the quality of the export. You can go from good, better, best, and I thought I had the setting on best, but it was in the middle on better, and so I tried exporting it again. The previous export was about 12 gigabytes. The second one was just under 3 gigabytes, so I don't really understand how I can get a better quality video that doesn't take as much space. So I'm gonna try and see with this video how that goes, and hopefully, at the very least, this will be up on Monday. Hopefully my brain will work. But yeah, so that has been me rambling today. I'm gonna stay in my pajamas and just keep drinking something warm and hopefully not get too bad a cold. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun. I saw all the museums that I wanted to see. I got to go up to the forest, which I love it. It smells so good. It's always just so nice to go in a forest and just walk among the trees. It's so giving. And yeah, the only drawback with yesterday was how dang cold it was. Yeah, that is enough for me this weekend. Let's see what next week brings us. And yeah. Oh, next week we will actually be in July. Hopefully it'll be warmer by then. Hopefully I'll be able to properly wear dresses every single day. Like, that has been my goal. To at least wear skirts. Preferably dresses all day. Isn't gonna happen today. Hopefully tomorrow. But anyway, I will see you next weekend. And yeah, until then, take care. Have the best awesomest time that you can possibly have. And I will see you later. Okay, take care. Bless, bless.